And we're going to have a conversation here with you and with each other. Can we all welcome Iric Headley, the director of Fort Wayne United? Good to have you here, brother. Since moving to Fort Wayne, God has blessed me beyond words with relationships, with people that he has crossed my path with. And near the top of that list is definitely this guy right here, just a great friend, Iric Headley. And so Iric is the director of Fort Wayne United. Iric works in the mayor's office, works with the mayor, and just is doing an incredible work in our city. And so I kind of stumbled upon, coincidence, right? I don't believe in those, just so you know. I don't believe in coincidence. It was no coincidence that God allowed me to stumble upon Fort Wayne United. And so I've been very privileged and pleased to just be able to have an impact in our city, and I believe around the world. I believe the ripples of what Iric has led this team to do and invited me and our church to be a part of with our city in partnership with Fort Wayne to be able to accomplish is just incredible. And so I just am excited to have Iric here. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about Fort Wayne United. I want you to hear from Iric. But first, Iric has a history here at Blackhawk and quite an incredible story. So Iric, would you start? Just tell us a little bit about your story and then how that led you to Blackhawk, because you've got quite a history there.
Yeah, so good morning to everybody. I'm so glad that Chip Clark was able to come up here and tell you guys about call and response to something that we do in our culture. So if I scream something at you, you got to scream it back. Is that right? Is that a deal? So again, the first thing we have to do is we have to give credit where credit is due. And I'm not necessarily giving Kevin credit for being Kevin, but giving Kevin credit for following the calling that God's placed on his life. As a pastor, as a leader, you have to do that. So thank you, man.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
that.
you. I'm humble.
And I would not be sitting up here and you guys would not be going across the tracks if it wasn't for him being courageous enough to follow the calling that God's placed on his life. So that's a big deal. My wife and I, who's sitting over here, my wife's name is Tamara, beautiful lady over there with my son. Braxton, and my other son is sitting with his grandpa. And we don't know where he's at, but
we'll find him later.
Yeah, we'll find him later. Yeah, we were at Blackhawk for approximately 12 years, and we came from Trinidad and Tobago, my mom and I, because my father was a pastor. So the first thing we have to do is really break down the first stereotype of all young black children who end up without a father is because their father went to prison or their father was shot. My father was a pastor, and I still ended up in the same predicament as many other kids, which is totally the complete opposite of what we typically think about as we have those implicit biases towards young black children. So I became a stereotype. And many years went by, and became more of a stereotype as my mom worked 2 jobs and I was home alone and living next to a drug dealer, and boom, that's where it all started. So many years later, we ended up at Blackhawk, and my father and my mom were divorced. And in my heart, what I believed was that God was the reason that my family broke apart. Because as a pastor, what I watched was my father being an amazing pastor, an amazing leader to the church, but our family was a different story, to put it nicely. So I believed in my heart as a young child that the reason that my father left and the reason our family broke apart was because of God. Blackhawk was the place that I have to confess to you that I learned that God was the reason that it should not have happened. Through so many people here at Blackhawk and so many relationships and so many teachings, that's where I learned that God had a different plan for our family, and the human element kicked in. And this was the place that I got married. This was the place I learned about parenthood. This was the place I met Denny Howard. And need I say any more? No. Your life changes when you meet people like Denny Howard. I learned a lot about myself, learned a lot about personalities and the gifts that I had and the gifts that my wife had and how we put those together, sitting in his office for many, many, many years. Blackhawk was the place that so many things happened. Kelly Bird was a great person in our lives. He taught me a lot about fatherhood from watching him, quite frankly. And so many other people that might not be here at Blackhawk, but Blackhawk was the place that we learned about family and how to serve God through our roles as husbands and wives and parents. So great job to the people here at Blackhawk and the family for embracing us and teaching us a different life.
Well, we praise God, speaking on behalf, I know, of everybody in the room, for how God used some of those foundational seasons in your life and your family's life, and that has led you, Iric, to some brand new excursions, some adventures that I know we've talked several times that you would have never seen coming in some ways, but God was also building that in so many ways. And so for some people in the room, very familiar with Fort Wayne United, some of our Meals for Healing initiatives that we've just jumped into as a part of that. But for those who don't know what Fort Wayne United is, walk us through what is the mission, what's the heart behind that, and how God built that up inside of you that has now turned into such a citywide partnership-minded effort that we're all engaged in.
So Fort Wayne United is a mayoral initiative. So what that means is that it was launched from the mayor's office, which for some people, they don't like that. I actually love it. It's been great. It's been amazing working for the city of Fort Wayne and our mayor. And homicide is the leading cause of death for African-American males ages 10 to 24. Not 24 to 50, but 10 to 24. I have a 9-year-old, and just to think about a year later, my son can become a statistic is just mind-boggling and hurtful just to think about it. So homicide being the leading cause of death in African-American males ages 10 to 24, we launched Fort Wayne United. And Fort Wayne United came from a White House initiative and also an initiative called Cities United, which came from an organization, a federal organization called National League of Cities. So we put those two together and launched Fort Wayne United to address the homicide issue, but through the increase of opportunities and hopefully increasing the life outcomes and the quality of life for young Black men and boys. So we started off small. And now it's a big, fat initiative that has gone nationwide from Fort Wayne, and we have a ton of work to do. But here's my pitch, Kevin. My pitch is that, and I shouldn't say this because it can get me in a position of being unemployed, but I really believe that I should not be employed by the mayor of Fort Wayne. The church should be leading this effort.
Yeah.
This is not a political issue, and we lose traction when we politicize this issue. We lose traction when we say, no, that's a Democrat issue, or that's a liberal issue.
Right.
And this is a conservative issue. We lose traction. These are lives. These are lives that have nothing to do with red or blue or Republican or Democrats. So the church should be leading an effort like this and saying, hey, we care about those that are losing their lives for whatever reason. But we care about it and we want to get engaged. So that's why we had to create a clergy committee. And when Kevin talks about how we met, it was on that clergy committee. So we invited so many different churches to be a part of it. It's led by Luther Whitfield and a guy by the name of John Such from Wallen Baptist, the church that we attend. And we invited so many different churches to be a part of it. So we do not have an interest in putting Fort Wayne United into the church, but we have an interest in putting Christ into Fort Wayne United. Amen. So we invited all those churches to be a part of it to help us to lead the effort. Yeah, that's worth the round of applause. And simply because I'm a Christ follower, we had to have that at the table. So appreciate you, man, leading Blackhawk to be a part of that.
Absolutely. It's been a joy. And I can tell you, and I'm going to be sharing a little more even through the message. I am still going to preach to you a little while today. But just about how important that has been in my journey, just the workings of God in my life. And so I'll share even some more about that. But a big part of that initiative for churches has been Meals for Healing. And so I got invited to join the clergy team with that, just representing Blackhawk and bringing churches together. And what a joy that has been. You talk about having conversations that cross tracks, into different cultures, different denominations. That's what I love. Fort Wayne United is a picture of what Jesus, I believe, wants to do through his church, in his church, bringing people of different races, people of different denominations, different cultures together and uniting them. And so that has been a joy. But one of the most tangible things that we've been able to be a part of is Meals for Healing. And so we've talked about that a little here. And Jessica Crozier is here. I promised I wouldn't call her out, but she does attend here. But he didn't promise he wouldn't call her out.
Call her out. Where is she at? Where's Jessica Crozier? There she is.
There she is.
So Jessica Crozier is the director of victims assistance. And sadly, there is a division called victims assistance, which tells you how many victims we have in the city of Fort Wayne. And she leads a team and every homicide, every suicide, and so many other things that many of us don't deal with on a yearly basis, she deals with on a daily basis. So we were able to partner up with the Fort Wayne Police Department. And this idea actually came from our race class. So we have a race class at Wallen. And we've been doing this race class for a year and a half, where we sit in a room, about 50 was the smallest number, and we've got all the way up to 120 on a weekly basis, talking about race, breaking down a lot of racial barriers. And a little small white lady, hopefully nobody's offended by that, Kevin.
No.
Walked up to me and she said,
We've got a few of those in the building, I believe. So, yeah.
Well, hopefully they're not offended by you saying that now, you know. So we have, so she walked up to me and she said, I don't know anything about black males, but can we serve meals to the moms or something? And I'm like, that's a good idea. Her name was Laura. Laura, we call her Laura G because I can't pronunciate her last name. And I said, that's an amazing idea. And I said, you just messed up. We're gonna make this into a big fat program. It's gonna be citywide. She's looking at me like, yeah, whatever, dude. And about 2 months later, I came back to her and I said, I talked to the director of victims assistance, I talked to the police chief, talked to this person, talked to that person, and we're gonna do it. And she's like, what did I just get myself into? So the first partner was Jessica Crozier and the victims assistance team and the Fort Wayne Police Department. And we got together and we created this program with a lot of liability attached to it. So we had a lawyer draw up some paperwork, but the hearts behind this program to serve the families of homicide victims. So what typically happens is a person is murdered, unfortunately, let's say Sunday night, Monday through Friday, the house is packed. Everybody's at the house. They're hanging out. They're bringing meals. Saturday, there's a funeral. Sunday, a few more people. Monday, right back to normal. And that family has to go back to normal life. So what this program allows us to do is go into those homes, not into the homes, deliver meals to those homes.
To them, yeah.
And drop off the meal, no strings attached, and we leave. And we show them the love of Christ. And that's it. So Blackhawk's a part of that. We have 8 other churches that are a part of that. And we're bringing the city together, and it's really working.
It is. What I love, there's a phrase Iric just used that I've heard you use several times when we talk about the meals for healing. And just so you know, we don't see this as an end-all. It's certainly not the solution to homicide, but is it a way that we can, as the church, be the hands and feet of Jesus? Because the last time I checked, God's grace gives me a no strings attached. That's the phrase you use a lot. A no strings attached love and grace, because I can't earn it. I don't deserve it. And so in their situation of grief, I love that it's a tangible picture, a starting place, if you will, of us being able to say, hey, Jesus loves you. We love you. We're so sorry. That's it. No strings attached. And we got to be one of the first churches on the ground, you know, when we launched this program. So many of you may not have known that. And in my hand, I hold a thank you card for a young life that was taken. Their family wrote a thank you card to us at Blackhawk. Just simple. Just simply says, thank you for the meals. They were good. But you know what our hope is that by providing some physical meals, that there's some spiritual meals that would come down the road. So what an initiative through our city, with other churches, other denominations, with the government, with all of these different pieces involved, just to be a tangible picture of Jesus is a beautiful thing. Can we celebrate that and just thank God for that opportunity?
And Blackhawk was not one of the first churches. Blackhawk was the first church to deliver that meal. Blackhawk was the first church to go out into the streets of Fort Wayne and deliver a meal to a family who lost somebody to homicide. So I just wanted to point that out.
We're honored. We had a meal prep team. We had a delivery team. And if I get in trouble if I start naming all the people, but my goodness, people came together. And it was one of those things, kind of like a mission trip. You think you go on a mission trip to be a blessing. We hope we were a blessing to this family, but I think what I've seen is that we got the blessing out of that by being able to be the church. And so a big part of Fort Wayne United, Meals for Healing, one of my favorite things that I've seen happen is that racial barriers have been torn down. Walls are coming down through our efforts. And so walk us through, Iric, a little bit of how racial barriers, the walls that you've seen being torn down, how does that play a role, first of all, in Fort Wayne United, but then we'll talk a little bit about what about as the church, because you're a part of that first and foremost.
The first question we have to ask is why do we need to break down racial barriers? So I have to address that first. So I personally look at the scriptures as instructional, right? And when we see Jesus going into all these different places that Jesus walked, that Kevin talks about, that Chip talked about, Jesus walked in those different places, but he did not have in his heart prejudice, attitude, implicit biases towards people that he was meeting, right?
Right.
But we do. We do. And I have them too. I probably have more than you guys. And what we do as African American and Black people is we throw out this term racism a little too much. I just want to be honest with you guys. And we have to do a better job of creating a safe place for people to explore what's really going on in their hearts. A lot of it is ignorance. A lot of it is ignorance. A lot of it is racism, let's be honest. But I believe that all of us, every last one of us in here, even my 5-year-old, has this concept that we call implicit bias. Mm-hmm. You know, explicit bias is when you have something towards somebody and you explicitly communicate it. You scream it from the rooftop. Implicit bias is what the Bible actually addresses, things that are in the heart towards somebody else because of what they look like, because of what side of town they are, because of their last name, because of what you think they do. I have them, and I see them coming out of my actions very often. So what we want to do is consistently address those, because we want people to help, but we want people to help for the right reasons. And we don't want charity cases like Chip's song says. We don't want people to come into our communities or to go anyplace else and say, I'm just gonna help you. I call it the SWAT team mentality, where people walk into a community, they throw money at it, they shut the door and they leave. We want people to engage in relationship. What did Jesus do?
Yeah, it's relationship.
That's relationship. So before we get engaged in relationship, we have to rid ourselves of those implicit biases that we have towards Blacks and that we have towards other cultures. We have to rid ourselves of those. So a lot of our initiative is getting the whole city to wrap their arms around this conversation of race, but getting the whole city to wrap their minds around helping young African-American males to save their own lives in many cases. I'll give you a little quote. My son the other day, my wife had a birthday on March 23rd, and my son, my 9-year-old son, has a little book that he wrote with a bunch of quotes, and he came up with these quotes. It's pretty good quotes.
It's impressive.
Very impressive.
I don't have a book like that.
I don't have a book like that, Kevin, and all my quotes are atrocious, right? And it should not be repeated. So we're in the car, and we're talking about this. We're talking about this quote book, and he was in the front seat. He's very excited now, riding in the front seat. And so he's in the front seat of my car, and he's telling me all these quotes. I'm like, man, that's a hot quote. That's a good quote. And he said, but Daddy, my favorite quote is this. And I'm going to tell you what he told me. He said, we all came over on different ships, but we're in the same boat now. Yeah.
I've got a phrase I use a lot, and I'm going to use it about that quote. That'll preach.
You need to preach that today, Kevin.
That'll preach.
You give him some credit.
I will. I'll give credit where it's due.
And I said, you came up with that one? He said, no, that's Martin Luther King. And I said, no, it's not, because I know all Martin Luther King quotes. He said, yeah, Daddy, it is. You know? And I said, no, it's not. He said, yes, Daddy, it is Martin Luther King. So me being, I'm not a millennial, but me second guessing my 9-year-old, I went home and I Googled it, right? And he was right. Martin Luther King did say that. We all came over on different ships, but we're all in the same boat now. We're all in the same boat now. And what God laid on my heart with Fort Wayne United was to create a boat that we can all get in to solve our own issues. We all have to get into this boat. But before you get into this boat, I want all of us, Kevin, to start to rid ourselves of what we think about others. Are we going to do it 100%? Absolutely not. We're human beings and we're flawed and we're sinful. I'm the first guy. But at least let's start to address these things honestly. In America, we are the most insensitive and hypersensitive culture at the same time. How does that work? How do we find that balance? Kevin asked for grace, but sometimes we also have to ask that people just toughen up and stop making a decision to be offended by everything. Right?
Amen.
So we need to have conversations so we can address these things, confess these things. In Wallen, we have made so much progress with this race conversation. The confessions, the love, the embrace that happens between blacks and whites. A year and a half into it, we're in our second location at a Lutheran church downtown. And we want to make sure that so many churches around our city are having this conversation in the same manner, honestly, lovingly, showing Christ to each other, embracing, addressing all the issues. There's a concept that many of you, I'm sure, and I appreciate it so much. It's called being colorblind. How many of you guys are colorblind?
Yeah.
Awesome. Sorry, I'm going to dog you. Just kidding. Here's this concept of colorblind. I appreciate the sentiment. The sentiment says, I don't see color before character.
Right.
Right?
With good heart, good intentions.
I have a good heart.
Yeah.
I'm not going to judge you off of your color. I'm going to judge you by the content of your character. That's what colorblind means. I propose to every last one of you guys in this audience that you definitely cannot tell me that you don't see that Chip Clark is a black man. There's no way in the world you can tell me you don't see that I'm a black man. There's no way in the world. Who wants to stand up and say that you see no difference between Kevin and I?
He's a lot better looking than me.
And Kevin has a better accent than I do. He really does. How many of you guys want to say that you don't notice Kevin's accent? My mom's from Trinidad. Go tell her that you don't notice her accent.
Right.
Do we really want to continue that? Here's what God wants us to do. Here's what Jesus wants us to do. I see that you're white. I see that you're white. I see that you're white. I see you're white. I see that you're different than me. But I love you. That's intentionality. That's effort, right? That's what makes the difference. So we have to embrace the differences. That's what Christ wants us to do.
Yeah. My
sons have two white grandpas. Two. Dennis Roars and Elmer Johnson. Both goes to this church. Both go to Blackhawk. They're as white as they come. But we love it. How dare I tell my sons that their grandpas aren't white? They see the difference. But what they don't see the difference is the love that when Grandpa Dennis walks into our house, how we embrace him. What they don't see is the difference on how we treat them.
Yeah. Amen.
We cannot be a colorblind culture. Just like a man cannot go home and tell his wife, I don't see that you're not a female. Go home and try that and see how it works out. It just doesn't work. Embrace the difference. Christ has made us different. My culture is different. It's okay. We are different. We are different. But when we tell ourselves that I don't see you as who you are, you also strip that person of their culture. And now you say, I don't see who you are. You're just like me. I'm not. And it's very easy for the majority to say, I don't see color. So we just want, in our race class, we challenge those things.
That's good.
Christ wants us to embrace the differences. They're not sinful. I love being a black man. I love it. I love my family. We love who we are. We have to embrace our differences and love our differences and challenge our differences instead of saying, I don't see them. So we appreciate the sentiment, but I really want to challenge people to learn more. Learn about the black person next to you. Learn more. Learn more about the person that's from a different country. Learn more. Don't just say, I don't see it. Because that makes us feel a little different too.
Amen. Well said. And I just so appreciate, I'll tell you, and I'm going to share a little of my journey in a moment, but these kind of concepts, some of the stereotypes, I moved from the South. Some of the stereotypes about being a Southern boy are very true. Some are not, a lot are. But I have just watched God take me on a journey. It's because of people like you. It's because of relationships. That's what I love about what we have, is we not only listen to each other, we hear each other, but we trust each other. We're sitting here together because you were invited here. Luther's coming next week because there's a relationship. And God has led me personally into that. And so I challenge you to do the same. But I want to thank Iric, and I want to ask you to join me in thanking Iric for being a black man, coming into a white church and being honest. I asked him to, yeah.
Thanks a lot, man.
I asked Iric, don't leave yet, come back, Iric, don't leave yet. I asked Iric to come and have freedom as he shared, and to do that with boldness and courage like you have today is something I don't take lightly. Thank you for doing that. And so we want to give you something. We're talking about the 1-5 here. So we've got a shirt. We have these available if you want some. Many of you have been asking. So Light the 1-5 is our initiative. And so we want to give Iric one of those and just tell you thank you today.
Let's check it out. Let's make sure this is okay for me to wear, Kevin.
That's right. What you think?
I'm really digging this, man.
You digging that?
You should have given this to me before so I could wear it up here.
You know, that would have been better.
Thank you, man.
Let's thank Iric one more time, guys.